If you're a caregiver, worried about an aging family member, or concerned that you have a higher risk of dementia than the average person, then you're in the right place. Fading Memories. Today we're discussing Lewy body dementia and how it differs from other dementias like vascular and Alzheimer's disease. And for those of you who are new here, my mom had Alzheimer's disease for 20 years, and my experience with Lewy body is pretty limited. So we're all going to learn together. I hope you enjoy this episode, and please share this with a friend, family member, or heck, make a stranger on the street listen. We all need to be as educated on these diseases as possible. Welcome to Fading Memories, a podcast for caregivers of loved ones with dementia. I'm your host, Jennifer Fink. My mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years, and when I went looking for answers, I had to start a podcast to find them. Join me as we navigate the challenges of dementia caregiving together. This podcast is your beacon of support and empowerment. Let's share our experiences, find solace, and discover the strength within us. Get ready to embark on a transformative caregiving journey with Fading Memories. If you're looking for additional advice, be sure to sign up for our weekly email newsletter. It's brief, gives you great advice. You can read it in less than 5 minutes, and you know where to find the link. It's in the website, on the show notes. We're working on subscriber-only information and specials, so you're not going to want to miss out. Caregivers, are you paying enough attention to your health? Do you suffer from poor sleep, brain fog, or sugar cravings? None of these issues have a quick fix, but adding Relevate from NeuroReserve to your day is an excellent place to start. With Relevate, you get science-backed nutrition to help strengthen and protect your memory and cognitive performance today and for years to come. You deserve a brain span that lasts your lifespan, and to help you get started, use the link in the show notes and code FM15 to get 15% off any regular order. I've been taking Relevate for 3 years now, and I've seen an improvement in my memory and thinking. Now, on with our show. Hello again, Fading Memories listeners. You know, I always appreciate you giving a little bit of your time. Today, we're talking about Lewy body dementia, which is not something I've talked a lot about. And I've learned some stuff about Lewy body from today's guest, Mary Lou Falcone. She wrote the book, I Didn't See It Coming. Have any of us seen it coming? So thanks for joining us, Mary Ann.
I'm happy to be here, Jennifer. Thank you for inviting me.
So you didn't see Lewy body coming. Lewy body affected your sweet hubby, Nikki Zahn. So you want to tell us a little bit about Nikki pre-Lewy body?
Absolutely. Nikki was a force of nature. He was a rocker in the 1950s. And everybody says, oh, yeah, the basement band, right? And I say, no, not the basement band. He was on the road at age 14 with the likes of Jerry Lee Lewis, Patsy Cline, and Johnny Cash. So he was a for real rocker. And at 21, decided that his rock and roll days were over. That was enough. And he would then devote his time to what his passion was always, which was art. Painting, drawing, illustration, etc. And he became a premier illustrator. His work hangs today in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And he was said to have been the inspiration for Roy Lichtenstein. So Nikki's pop art came before Lichtenstein's pop art came, which is very nice to know. And Nikki was, I think, to categorize him as a kind man is an understatement. He was absolutely the life of every party. He was the kind of person who made you feel at home, even if you were suffering from an anxiety in the situation you were in. When he died, which was in July of 2020, over 250 notes came in, all saying basically the same thing. He always made us feel special. He was the kindest person we knew. And that is a thumbnail sketch of Nikki.
So in your book, his art is the art at the beginning of each chapter. Hold up here a little bit, if I can get it straight, for those who are watching the video. So You guys were humming along, handling life, and then some situations occurred.
Right. We had been friends since 1973. In 1983, we got together as a couple. Nicky was married when I first met him. His ex-wife and I are still good friends, which says a lot for him and for her. And he in 83, we became a couple. We were a couple for 34 years. And at that juncture, I asked Nicky to marry me. Why did I do that? Because I had said no to his invitations for 34 years to marry him. And the reason I said no was because we had a great life together. We had everything going for us. And my theory was, if it's not broken, why would you fix it? It was perfect. But I began to see things that didn't feel right. And I thought, if you love that hard, then you need to be able to protect the person you love. And so when I asked him to marry me, his comment was, why all of a sudden this change of heart? What's changed? And I said, well, we're in our 70s. We're not getting any younger. We love each other very much. And why not? What I didn't add was, I'm frightened that something is happening. And I want to be there to be able to protect you no matter what. And so what did happen was, at the end of 2016, we were in Vienna, and we traveled a lot, and we were there. I was there on business. Nicky was with me, and we were there for the Vienna New Year's concert of the Vienna Philharmonic, and they were my client. And in real life, I'm a publicist, and so Vienna was my client, and the conductor Gustavo Dudamel, who was conducting them, was also my client. So I had a double header going on. And we had this wonderful trip. And I noticed Nicky was very fatigued on this trip. And I thought, well, he's just tired, traveling and all that. And then one night, we were supposed to meet at a restaurant he knew well, which was a block and a half from where we were staying. And I met friends there, and we were expecting Nicky, and almost an hour passed, no Nicky. And he was always on time, if not early. And I got frightened. And I excused myself, and I didn't know where I was going to go to try to find him, but I had to try. And so I left the restaurant and I went toward the main square, toward St. Stephen's Cathedral. And lo and behold, miracle of miracles, Nicky is walking toward me. It was like out of a movie, and I was blessed, and I knew it. And as I approached him, what I saw was fear in his eyes. And he looked at me and he said in a very abrupt manner, and Nicky was never abrupt, and he said, "You didn't give me the address. You didn't write it down." And something in me went quiet. And I said, "You are totally correct. It's my bad. I should have written it down. And I didn't. Please forgive me. I'm so glad you're safe. Let's go to dinner." And that was the beginning of seeing something that I was frightened of. When we came back stateside, having gone to Paris in between, again, very lucky couple doing what we wanted to do. But in Paris, there was a night that was a little scary. And little did I know what had happened is he'd had a heart attack. And I didn't know it, and he didn't know it, because next morning he was fine. Went to our doctor when we got back, and Nicky always did a 6-month checkup. He was a person who was very fastidious about the way he looked, about his health, about his exercise, and about his food, and about going to the doctor every 6 months. And this was the 6-month checkup. And he said to the doctor, "What happened to that calcium score test you had me take 6 months ago? You never gave me the results, and I'm curious." The doctor looked at the record and said, "Oh my goodness, we're going to get you to a cardiologist now." And they sent him for a stress test. They found that his heart was in very bad shape from the stress test, that he had had a heart attack. They couldn't tell us when, but it was damaged from a heart attack, and he needed to have an angiogram. That's when I proposed. and we did get married on the 13th of February. On the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, we went to the hospital for the angiogram. And on the 15th, he was operated on for triple bypass surgery. And that was the beginning of the end, because it's supposed to make you energized. It's supposed to cure your heart. It's supposed to be the panacea. And it was anything but. The hallucinations, which began during that period, which were the result of anesthesia. And we were told that's quite normal with heavy duty anesthesia for open heart surgery. Hallucinations are part of the trip, so to speak. But those hallucinations never left. And that I didn't know. That I didn't know till much later. And he was weak and didn't get stronger. And he kept losing weight. And the weight loss was alarming. A year and a half later, with all of this not getting any better, we switched our doctors. And just because it was time to switch. And the new doctor that we got actually listened to what I was saying, which was, I think he needs an MRI baseline. They did it. They found a phrase that I hate because I think it's a bunch of bunk, which is age-appropriate deterioration, which is code for we don't know what's going on,
Very true.
So, right? So from there, I said, okay, what's next, please? This isn't good enough. And this doctor was so brilliant, and he sent us out of network to another hospital, to a neurologist who was a brilliant diagnostician, got it on the first try that it was Lewy body dementia from a cognitive test and watching him walk. It was diagnosed as Lewy body dementia with Parkinsonian aspects. So he had Parkinson's and Lewy body. And it was so definitive. He just said it. But then he said, we'll do a DAT scan, which is DAT scan, which is a dye that gets injected, which is like an MRI, except it is very intense in terms of brain function. And they did a REM sleep test because people with Lewy body act out in their sleep. They punch, their legs go. And that's a sign with Lewy body. So hallucinations, REM sleep, disorientation in terms of cognitive ability and memory loss, handwriting that gets smaller and smaller. I mean, all these things can appear, don't necessarily appear. And sure enough, after the two tests, I'm fond of saying that they didn't confirm the diagnosis, they supported it. Because there is a very different field of thinking about whether you can confirm the diagnosis before autopsy or not. And I am a believer that you can. That is my personal belief. And I think that all of these tests supported the diagnosis, which was accurate.
Getting a Lewy body dementia diagnosis, especially right off the bat, that's very rare because it's not easy to spot, it's not usually what's the word? Like, it's not the go-to people would assume.
No, you're totally right. It looks like Alzheimer's and it behaves like Alzheimer's. It also can behave like a psychiatric disorder. And so there are many versions of Lewy body. That is, it looks differently on almost everybody. There are some similarities, but not a lot. So it's not a one size fits all. And the saying is, if you've seen one case of Lewy body dementia, you've seen one case of Lewy body dementia. And so you can't totally fault the medical profession for not getting it. But I think awareness is the key here. And that's my whole thing, is raising awareness. Through this book that I wrote, I Didn't See It Coming, Scenes of Love, Loss, and Lewy Body Dementia. It was written to bring awareness to a disease, because my belief is that with awareness will come the kind of funds that need to support research. And with research, we're going to find biomarkers. And with biomarkers, we're going to find a slowing of it down or a cure, finally. And that's what needs to happen. That's the process. But without awareness, none of it happens, because doctors, the medical profession doesn't know what it is looking at a lot of the time. And for instance, if you go into the ER, if you're having an episode with Lewy body, and things can get rocky and rough and angry and I don't want to say violent, but certainly aggressive. And so you're taken to the ER because you're having an episode, and the first thing they're going to give you is Haldol. That is the last thing you should ever be given as a person with Lewy body dementia, because it will cause all kinds of problems and possibly a psychotic break. And if you say, my loved one has Lewy body dementia, they can't take Haldol, chances are they're going to look at you as if you have two heads, because they don't even know what you're talking about. So my advice to people to whom that happens, or with whom that happens, is to say, my loved one is allergic to Haldol. If you say you're allergic, nobody's going to touch it.
That's a good tip.
Yeah. And I also will say that when you get end-of-life kits in hospice, you get morphine and you get Haldol in that kit. And you mustn't, with Lewy body, you mustn't use the Haldol. You must throw it away. I mean, why it's in kits to begin with for Lewy body, I have no idea, but it is, and you have to be vigilant.
That's the biggest challenge with all of these cognitive diseases, is that I feel like we have to do all the learning and we have to educate the medical profession, and that's backwards, but that's where we're at right now, which is why awareness is so important.
And we do, Jennifer. I mean, it is so important that we get out there and we make people aware. Not just lay people, the medical profession too.
Oh, definitely. I had a conversation with the doctor. He prescribed the acid reducers, the proton pump inhibitors. And I said, are you familiar with this study that has linked long-term use of these medications to increased risk of dementia? And you would have thought I had spoken Klingon or Babel or something, because this doctor had no clue what I was talking about. And he's in a position to be prescribing these regularly. And he just shrugged his shoulders and went, eh. And he said, do you have dementia? And I was like, I really wanted to give him an education. And I said, no. I gave him my family history, my mom, my maternal grandmother, my maternal great-grandmother. And I said, I will not be taking these medications long-term, but, for the 3 months that you're prescribing them, we'll see if it fixes the problem. I have an issue with my throat that they think is silent reflux, which, okay, we'll try it. Because they don't really.
But not forever.
Oh, heck no. No, by the time Valentine's rolls around, we'll be done. And hopefully the problem will be better, because I don't really want to get into other, I'm good with this diagnosis. I'm hoping what he's thinking works. He did look at my throat, so we'll go there. But it just.
And we're sending good wishes. Yes.
Thank you. Well, it just appalled me that it was like he was completely clueless. Now, it's not, you take these long term and you're increasing your risk. There's a link. So this study did a lot more to it. It produced a lot more questions than it did answers, which it's not a bad thing, but I kind of felt like he should have been at least aware that there was this study, and he doesn't have to agree with it, but anyway, that's the medical. Yeah. I was like, I keep thinking I should send him the article, but I keep not doing it. So I don't know, maybe that's a clue.
Well, I think we're here to be helpful.
Yeah.
We're here to be helpful to the medical profession, not adversarial, just helpful.
I guess I could send it to him and say, hey, here's this article that I read in case you are interested. Just kind of put it politely.
I would.
So you kind of described some of Nikki's earlier symptoms. What other signs of possible Lewy body are you aware of that maybe, because obviously this is less known and less understood than Alzheimer's, which isn't understood very well either. So.
Right. Well, first of all, Alzheimer's is the most progressive of the dementias. Lewy body is the second most progressive of the dementias, affecting 1.4 million people that we know of with it in the United States. Now, heavens knows how many more have it, but it's a significant number. And if you add ALS, muscular dystrophy, and cerebral palsy and put them all together, and those are all well-known diseases, the aggregate number does not equal the Lewy body number. Staggering to think about. So what are the signs? Basically, it's hallucinations and delusions, cognitive fluctuations, and that's what makes it very different than Alzheimer's. In Alzheimer's, you start at a level, and that level cognitively decreases and stays decreased throughout your time with the disease until such time as you're completely not cognitively available. Lewy body is like the roller coaster. It goes up and down. So one day you, the person, are 100% you. And the next day, you don't even know who your loved one is. And that fluctuates back and forth. The person who's experiencing it knows what's happening. They understand it. I know that for a fact because about 2 months before Nicky died, he wrote a poem, which I put in the book, which describes his descent in being taken over by this nasty person called Louis. And I used to say that there was Nicky who was present, and then there was Louis who was present. And the same thing with Alzheimer's, sometimes it's the person and then it's Al who's present. And so that really is a big differential between the two. There's also changes in movement, especially when Parkinson's is part of it. For Nicky, it was a dragging right foot. It was hands that weren't able to grasp things quite the same way anymore, ultimately leading to not being able to cut a piece of meat or using a utensil. And there's also the behavior shifts that someone who was never particularly angry or frustrated, and all of a sudden those things come into it. And there's what I referenced before, the REM sleep disorder, which is acting out in your dreams. As things progress, you get more and more symptoms. The swallowing becomes a problem, the leg cramps, incontinence, the list goes on. And it only gets more severe and worse. I think that for the caregiver, it is very hard to watch all of this and to keep an equilibrium and to keep a positive attitude. However, when you stop to think about the person who's being affected by this, that person can't help what's going on. So your frustration doesn't help in the situation. It only serves to make the person feel bad. And of course, we're all human. And of course, we're going to make mistakes and we're going to misstep. But as the caregiver, it's important when you're feeling those anxieties come on yourself or the anger, leave the room. Just leave the room. Scream into a pillow. Breathe in some lavender. Do some deep breathing. There are techniques where you can help yourself. And then go back. If you're still feeling the frustration and the anger, then somewhere down the line, you have to forgive yourself for that because, it happens. But you do the best you can.
That roller coaster must be tremendously difficult for both parties. My mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And so it's difficult. So she died when I was 54. And trying to do the math right. And she had progressed, slowly throughout the 20 years. It's hard to remember before Al, as you said. But there were never those days where it was my mom again. So I didn't have those positive, hopeful days. And then the crashing down of, now Louie's back or Al's back or whatever we are dealing with. So do they have specific Lewy body support groups? Now we're going to take a quick break for an ad. These ads help me continue to bring the show to you for free. When I learned that despite eating as healthy as possible, we can still have undernourished brains, I was frustrated. I also live in a farming community, so I'm aware that our food isn't grown as well as we need. Learning about neuroreserves, Relevate, and how it's formulated to fix this problem convinced me to give them a try. Now I know many of you are skeptical, as was I. However, I know it's working because of one simple change. My sweet tooth is gone. I didn't expect that, and it's not something other users have commented on, but here's some truth. My brain always wanted something sweet. Now, fruit usually did the trick, but not always. One bad night's sleep would fire up my sugar cravings so much they were almost impossible to ignore. You ever have your brain screaming for a donut? Well, for me, those days are gone. It's been about 6 months since I started taking the supplement, and I have no regrets. I believe in my results so much that I'm passing on my 15% discount to you. Try it for 2 or 3 months and see if you have a miraculous sweet tooth cure, or maybe just better focus and clarity. It's definitely worth a try. Now back to our conversation.
Oh, yes. The support groups that I attended were run by an organization called the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center, heavy on the resource, because these people were angels, in my opinion. Norma Loeb is the woman who started the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center about 7 years ago. So it's a relatively new organization. Her mom had Lewy body for about 18 years. That's long. That's very long for Lewy body. That's generally not the case. And Norma started this organization, support groups, helpline. The helpline is an amazing thing. The website is so full of helpful information in many languages, I might add. And the helpline for anybody who's listening is lbdny.org. And it is such a blessing to have that. And so I joined the support group. I was told about it by the actor David Hyde Pierce, who's a big advocate for Alzheimer's and dementia in general. And he told me about this organization, and they were my lifeline. So everybody needs an advocate of some kind, a sounding board. And I guess if I have one message to caregivers out there, it's you are not alone. You feel that way. There's no doubt about it. You feel like you're the only one on the planet who's having to deal with all of this. But you're not alone. You really aren't. And there are people here to help you, and we're all among them. And there are resources, and you just have to reach out. It's not hard. The first step might be a little bit tenuous because you don't want to divulge, you don't want to share, but it's only in sharing that we learn. And the neurologist who was so brilliant at diagnosis was not so brilliant at telling me what to expect. As a matter of fact, he wouldn't answer me. But he did say something that that turned out to be prophetic. And what he said was, you will find out more from people who have the disease than you will from anybody else. And in that, he was right, because we all share openly what's going on. And it's not a pretty picture. But when everybody's going through it, you don't mind sharing it.
And it's important so that, it goes back to the sharing, goes to the awareness, leads to hopefully discovering a cure, maybe a prevention, and then everybody's better. I'm a big advocate that our society needs to understand these diseases far more than they do, because it affects everybody, whether you're aware of it or not.
That's
and
right.
If you've got a neighbor who's doing odd things, it's much better for everybody if you understand maybe what's going on than maybe calling the cops on your wacko neighbor who's trying to get into your back door or whatever.
You're right. You're right. And this whole thing of not being afraid to tell people what's going on. We do have a fear. We have a fear of diseases like dementia. We have a fear of talking about them, and we have a fear of death. Those two things are big ticket numbers. And for me, Nikki and I sat down when he was diagnosed. We came home and he said 3 things to me. Actually, he said it in the hospital waiting room. The first was, I am looking forward to meeting your father. And I've always wanted to meet your dad. My dad died in 1981. So it was Nikki's way of telling me he knew he was dying. The second thing he said was, we have had a great run. We cannot be sad. And the third was very sweet. I live by that every day. And the third was, please help me to keep my dignity. And that third prompted the discussion about, who do we tell? Do we tell? How much do we tell? And we made this collective decision together that we were going to bring our friends and family into our loop, tell them what the diagnosis was, tell them what the disease does, and ask for them, if they're able, to join us in this journey. Mostly everybody did. The reason that we thought it was important, and I say we because, we get diagnosed, we do this together. I do believe that. And the reason that it was important was because people will wonder what you were saying about the neighbor, for instance, who's trying to get in your back door and you call the police. I mean, the fact is that what you understand, you're able to then deal with and not gossip about. It's human nature, if somebody's acting a little wonky, to say, oh, what's going on with them? I mean, did they drink too much? Did this happen? Whatever. And the answer is no. There is a reason for this. And once you understand the reason, your ability to be compassionate and open and helpful is exponentially expanded. And that's really important.
I agree. And I think people, they hang their hat on, I don't want my loved one to be ridiculed. I don't want them to lose their dignity. And so they don't tell people, and that's exactly what happens. You guys did it right by bringing people in early before Nikki did something that could offend and turn off the friends, and then they walk away and they don't have the benefit of helping and understanding. And it reminds me of an article that I read, and it kind of actually irritates me knowing what I know about Lewy body, which I got a lot more understanding after reading the book, is people that were sort of close to Robin Williams were like, he was a monster. And it's like, no, he was sick. And
he didn't know it. He didn't know he had Lewy body. I think he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, which was part of it for sure. But it was only in autopsy that they found his brain was riddled with alpha-synucleins, which are the rogue proteins that are Lewy bodies.
That's probably not a word you expected to be able to pronounce like that.
No, it's not. And I don't use it very often because nobody will remember it. What you do remember is that rogue proteins, these proteins attack your brain and they do damage. That's what you need to know.
And it's, when you're talking about dignity, it bothers me that people remember him and are sharing that feeling about him when they don't realize that it was most likely the disease and his not understanding what was going on. I mean, it's not a secret that he was a pretty heavy drug user earlier in his years. I think he was still doing drugs somewhat, probably to deal with the disease, because if you're having hallucinations, you probably want to do anything to shut those off. But are there other well-known people besides, obviously,
Yes.
That's the only one I can think of that I know.
Tom Seaver, the ball player for the Mets. He had Lewy body. Casey Kasem, the DJ, the celebrated DJ. The actress, the old actress, Dina Merrill, had it. Frank Corsaro, who was head of the Actors Studio here in New York and a major Broadway and opera director, had it. So they're there. Estelle Getty is another one.
Oh, okay. So Casey Kasem is probably up there in my teenage years and young adult years with Robin Williams, because I'm an 80s kid. So Casey Kasem, always playing the hits.
Yeah, exactly.
The exact term is not coming to mind at the moment, but I'm sure most of my listeners can relate to Robin Williams and Casey Kasem. And were they diagnosed after they died, or?
Robin Williams after, Casey Kasem, I believe, during his lifetime. Tom Seaver, I believe, during his lifetime. Yes, and yet, someone currently who has Lewy body dementia is Ted Turner.
Ah, I don't think I knew that one.
No, and it's not. I mean, it is fact. It's just not widely known. He one of the CBS shows, I think it was Sunday Morning, basically was interviewed. This is probably 6-7 years ago, and they referred to it, that he had it. It was in its earlier stages, but until somebody or a family of somebody comes forward and gets behind this cause, it is not going to have the traction that it needs to have. For instance, Bruce Willis and his family. I just have such admiration for these people who have come forth and said he has frontotemporal dementia, because they are going to help so many people by doing that. He's a beloved character, and people will respond. I'm waiting for the day when somebody, I mean, I don't wish it on anybody, please, but if someone has it out there who is a celebrity, won't you please think about coming forward and joining us in making people aware?
It's what happened with cancer. I mean,
yes,
I think this was, people were hesitant to refer to it as cancer, and they called it the big C. I think that was a little bit before my time. I know we had a family friend who had breast cancer, and it was a little hush hush, which is now people talk about it very openly. So I think we're getting there with these cognitive diseases, and that's why your book and these kind of conversations are so important. And I do a lot of advocacy for Alzheimer's for obvious reasons, and you're doing the same for Lewy body. It's a lot of work.
Well, it's a lot of work, but it's the kind of work that will lead to answers. Without awareness, nothing happens. Put your head in the sand. It's not going to do it.
And it won't go away either.
No, it won't. No, it's there. It's with us. So it's time to take the gloves off and throw the punches where they need to land, which is right in the economic sector, which then funds what needs to be done. I mean, we need awareness, then we need funding, then we need the brilliant minds that are out there to find those cures, and then we have a better society. And the brain, in my opinion, is the last frontier to be conquered.
I fully agree. I've said that a lot. They talk about space and going to Mars, and all that's interesting, but I think they know way more about space and Mars and all of that than we know about our brains, which is scary, but interesting.
Yes.
With Alzheimer's, there's a lot of talk, especially lately, excuse me, about lifestyle choices being important for brain health and slowing the progression of the disease if you catch it early enough, which is still not super easy. Is there any kind of advice similar for Lewy body? I would assume some of the, eat right, get good sleep, exercise, all those things that people really don't want to do.
Yeah, those are just good health in general. But they know so little about Lewy body dementia, and so there is no roadmap here. There is no roadmap, and the title of the book is pretty apt. I didn't see it coming. None of us sees it coming, not any of it, and this comes on seemingly quickly, although. If I look back, probably a good 8 years, maybe 10 years, there were little signs along the way, but not anything you would point to and say, that's a problem. It was just in the moment. And those are little signs then became bigger signs. So being aware is just key in all of this.
What were the little signs that you can look back on and go, oh yeah, that probably was a key?
I would see a little paranoia. Nikki was not paranoid. I would see anger, flares of anger. Again, not in his general nature. Fatigue, not part of the recipe. Those are the early things that I saw. And then as we got closer to 2016, I saw things like forgetting words. I mean, this is a man who finished everybody else's sentences. So, this is, I saw tentativeness in speaking. As I mentioned, I saw the leg dragging, and then everything was fine. And then it wasn't again. And I remember being in Stockholm, Sweden, and this was after the open heart surgery. And I got to the airport and I thought, Nikki has no idea how to get through security. Oh my God, I think I've made a mistake by taking this trip. And it was a business trip I had to take, and he was invited as a guest. And we got through security and we got to the hotel in Stockholm, in Sweden. And Nikki couldn't find his way from the front desk to the hotel room, or from the hotel room down to the breakfast room. I realized he had to be accompanied every inch of the way. And then I realized that the fatigue was off the charts, and that he needed to sleep all day in order to be functional at the evening festivities. It was so frightening. And that's when I began to realize we need that MRI. We need this really looked at seriously, because something is dramatically wrong here. And indeed it was.
And the doctors just assumed it was like residual recovery from the open heart surgery?
Yes. And then it wasn't. You can go for 6 months with things healing but you get beyond a year and things aren't better. There's something going on. And I've traded notes with other Lewy body folks who have experienced heart surgery. And this is just anecdotal, but there seems to be a correlation between anesthesia and recovery in terms of brain activity. And what happens is, I think, and this is only a supposition, that the anesthesia, depending on how long you're out, will exacerbate what's going on in the brain. It has to be there. I mean, I don't think anesthesia manufactures it, but if those rogue proteins exist, I think that anesthesia of a duration will shake things up.
I'm a pretty big advocate for being very cautious about surgeries as we age. I have a family friend who had both knees replaced, kind of a standard thing these days, for better or worse. And he had a third surgery. I don't remember what it was for. Nothing serious, nothing like open heart surgery. And he never was quite the same after the third one. He had cognitive issues. I don't think he has Lewy body, based on what I know from his demeanor.
Right.
But it's like, were all those surgeries super necessary? I mean, he was already in his late 70s, early 80s. Yeah, your knees are crappy. Mine act like two rusty hinges. It's not fun, but I'm not going to have them replaced until absolutely necessary, because you got to have them replaced again, 10, 15 years later. Oh. And nobody discusses, anesthesia alters your brain temporarily.
Yes,
and if you do, a knee replacement in January, and then maybe again the second one in July, and then, the following February, you need something else. That's a lot of brain alterations you're doing.
Yes, it is. And I am with you. I do not believe that unless it's absolutely life-threatening, that is a good idea at a certain age. I simply won't do it. I'll take the creaky knees. Thank you very much.
there are ways to strengthen them. I'm working on that, but
Yeah, absolutely. Exercise is a good thing.
It's not always fun, but
no, it's not.
the fact that my office is downstairs is not necessarily ideal, but we'll deal with it. If we have to move locations in 20 or 30 years, that's on the table. We're not married to these specific walls. I think that's the other thing people need to understand is that we need to make it easier on ourselves to age versus clinging onto a single family home that is not designed for aging in place, or people with any kind of chronic illness like crappy knees or Alzheimer's or Lewy body or whatever else is out there. I'm trying to avoid them all.
No, and also depending upon where you are, where you're living, you need to feel safe and protected, and above all, loved. Those are the three elements that I think make the difference. So the surroundings don't matter as much as that feeling of protection and safety and love.
I agree. I know a podcaster that just moved his dad from one state to another. Dad now lives across the street from him. This just all happened. So, my first instinct is, yikes, changing their surroundings can be challenging, but he'll have, son, daughter-in-law, grandchildren, more people close by to help out. And they fixed up the house so that when his dad arrived from the old state, it felt like home. I mean, he enlisted a couple dozen or more people, and in 5 hours, the house went from empty to situated, like pictures hung, I was like, wow. And it's like, when you say the surroundings are more important, or not the surrounding, but the feeling, I think the feeling that he gave his dad immediately is going to be a big, big difference in his transition. So
that is so beautiful and so important.
Yeah, if it wasn't across the country, I would have been one of those people either helping pack up or helping unpack. But it's a cross-country trip, so it wasn't an option. So where can people find your book?
Basically, you can go to Amazon.com. You just put in, I didn't see it coming, Mary Lou Falcone, and Amazon has it. Barnes & Noble has it. Your local booksellers may have it. I'm a big advocate of local booksellers as well. And it is hopefully going to be a tool to help you navigate. It's a story. It's a love story. It's our love story. But within the love story is the truth and what really happens. And I think that if you're going to write, which I always said I would never write, but then again, I learned never say never. But if you're going to write, then it is, I think, incumbent upon you to tell it all, not just the pleasant parts. Because if you're going to help someone, they need to know the full story, not the partial story.
Well, and the best thing about your book, I'm not sure any chapter is more than 5 pages?
Yes.
2 or 3 pages?
Right.
So it's perfect for caregivers. If you need your 5-minute you time, you can pick up this book and read 1 to 3 chapters in 5 minutes and feel connected to other people who have gone through this. And then you can get back to all the other things you got to do.
Well, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. I wrote concisely for a reason. And it's because caregivers in particular don't have the time to spend luxuriating in pages and pages and pages. You need your information in a palatable way, but in a concise way. And that's what I tried to bring to my reader.
And there's a lot of other characters, so to speak, other family members we didn't get to touch on. Marianne's got a very interesting background as a caregiver, so Nikki was not her first go around with caregiving. So you can learn more about that when you read the book. And I will make sure that the resources that you mentioned earlier are in the show notes, so anybody that's dealing with Lewy body or suspecting they've got a Lewy body situation happening can just easily click on them. They're hot links and get the support yeah, it's important. I do a lot of advocacy with the Alzheimer's Association. Understandably, that's my group. But like I said,
we're all in this.
Yep.
Dementia is the umbrella.
Yep.
And off of it come these spokes, and we're all part of it in some way, shape, or form. If not the person who has it, the person who is caring for and or will be involved in some way.
And it's just nice to know if, your neighbor is suddenly shouting at you across the fence for, why? Maybe you'll have a little more understanding and you could be a help instead of making things worse unintentionally. But,
right.
My platform is everybody in society is affected by one of these cognitive impairment diseases. You just may not be aware of it, and we need to spread that awareness. So I'm glad that you came on today to help spread the awareness of Lewy body, since that's not my lane.
But I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate the opportunity to just encourage kindness.
Listening all the way to the end, and as a bonus, here's what you can expect next Tuesday.
One of the things we learned most really about that whole experience was it's less about even how good a night's sleep they had. It's about what they want to be able to do the next day. And that's kind of where Dawn House came from. It's about the dawn of a new day. It's about not that setting sun, but the sunrise. And what are the things they want to feel good to be able to do the next day? They want to play with their grandchildren. They want to be able to go on outings or go on walks or do their exercise program. One woman who is a very competitive bridge player just wanted to know that she was going to be fresh and clear the next day so that she could play a good bridge game. It really was eye-opening. It's more about what's coming up and what's forward rather than, looking at what happened last night or the night before. Obviously, they all tie in together, but that's really the story that we came away with.
Thanks for listening today, and we'll be back in your ears again next Tuesday. Please support our sponsors, for they help us bring this show to you for free.